Welcome back, friends. This is the 10th video in the tutorial series. In the last tutorial, we learned about the tab bar controller, and I think this is time for now to see how you can save a record into a repository. So go ahead and click on Xcode icon from the toolbar, open your project. Let's run it once again to make sure we understand where we are before. So what we did was we added 3 bars. The second is what we have coded before. We have linked it. We've shown that how the linking works. And now we are going to make this save work after we enter all the right values, of course. Okay, so go ahead and close that. And before we do any saving, I want to let you know that with your Xcode, it comes with a very simple SQLite database. As you know, on your iPhone, you don't want to have a very heavy database. So, you want to have a database which can store data for your app if you have an app on your phone, and it inherently provide that feature and you can store data into a database, right? If you are totally beginner and new to database concept, assume database as a repository where you can store data so you can see it later, right? So right now what is happening, you enter a book name and you're not saving it, so it is not persisting somewhere onto a store. So when you come back next time, you can see that record. That is not happening now, and we're going to make that happen. All right. So first thing first, what you need to do is there on your navigation bar, you can see there is something known as book tracker tutorial dot x data mode id, right? So go ahead and click on that. This is your built-in database. Every table or every entity where you store data will be listed here, and you can create your own custom entity to store data, right? So you know that you're going to create a book. So book is an entity where you can store all the book records. So how do you create an entity? If you go all the way down, you can see there's an option known as add entity. Go ahead and click on that. By default, it will take the name entity. You go ahead and change it. You can rename it to, let's say, book. I will use the first letter as capital for this entity. So we'll say book, or rather I'll say, yeah, books or book, maybe book, that's fine. This can have different attribute which you want to store, right? For example, book will have a book name that you are asking the user to enter, all in small. That's how I like to do it. What is that book name? It's of type string. You remember the variable which I have taught you before, same concept. You will make it as a string. Then you have an author name. You will say author name. This is also string. You have a genre, which will be also a string. Then you have a status. That is also a string. So all string values that you want to store in this. Great. Once you have done with this, you can see that book is an entity. It has 4 different fields or attributes. So, and when you store record, it'll have multiple records. So one book will have book name, status, author name, genre, similarly others as well. So look at it carefully. These names are going to be very important when you're going to refer to it. So that's the first step of doing. You can have more than one entity. You will learn that as we go along the process, but for now, all our books will be stored in the book entity. Okay. Now, once you created the entity in your book tracker tutorial data mode, I want to tell you that when you created this app, there is a file automatically created by your system known as app.delegate.swift. This file has all the necessary function to start your application, and also the methods and functions for persistent data or data storage. So you can see here, this is for your UI screen, which brings up your screen. You don't have to worry about it at this point in time. But similarly, you can see that there is a CoreData stack area, which is all about persistent container. It's saving data, and all these are all already available to you, and we're going to leverage that for getting your function done. How do you do that? For doing that, what you need to do is go back to your file again, add view, controller.swift. You want to save a record when users pressing that button. If you recall, that's a validate button, right? So right now we are validating everything, doing nothing right now, right? Besides the validation. So we will say that once all the validation are right, if everything is right, if it is not right, it will go and stop in whether book cannot be found, author cannot be found, genre cannot be found. But if all of these have positively passed along, that means everything is right, then I want to save the book. So when you want to save the book, you would like to call the else, which is like this condition it will meet. Let's define a function which we'll call. So I will go ahead and define a function. Let's say name of that function is save book. So you know how to define a function. I will mark it. Mark, I have taught it last time. Around, put a dash, then I will put another mark and say save book to database. Right. I'll tab it to align it to the lines of code, and here I will define a function. This is how you define a function. Name it, let's say save book. The syntax how I want it. No values will be passed to it and nothing it will return. Right, so this is my save book. And whenever all the conditions are right, I know that now is the time to save book. I'll call save book. So what you want to do in the save book? Now here is a part which is a new piece of code you'll learn. So the way to save the book is you need to get a reference to this app delegate. Once you get the reference to the app delegate, you'll get a reference to the context, which is this persistent container context. Context is where it will know that how to go back to the database and store it. And then once you get the context, you do all the operations that you need to do for saving. So go ahead and see this piece of code very carefully. We will learn about this time and again. So don't worry too much if it is coming too difficult for you. So let is the way I define a variable which will never be used again, if you recall, right? So let app delegate. This is my variable name. So if you recall, I always start with a small letter, first word, capital letter, second word. Say app delegate equals to, you'll say UI application is by default available. This is for the application running. So from that application, you say there's a shared variable known as delegate, and that delegate I want to get as this file name, which is app delegate. Okay, so I'll have the delegation available in this variable. Then I will define another variable known as context. So notice this warning here. This basically means that you defined something but you never used it. You can go ahead and read this. So this, you're saying that you have defined but you have never used it. Now context equal to, what you will say here is the app delegate that you have defined. Now you're using it, that error will go away. Dot, you will say persistent container. Remember that was the name it has there in the file. And from there you want to get the view context. If you want to see that again, you can see persistent container view context. That's the context you have. You are taking that context back into your variable. And once you have that context, what you want to do is now you can define your book, right? So you can say, let me have another variable book, which is of my type book. How do you get that? So you'll say book. Okay. And within bracket, you will say context. It need a context, and that context name is also context. So I'll give context. You can give any name here. If it is confusing, I'll say context, my context. How about that? Okay. And here I'll say the context is my context. Okay. All right, so this is a space I need to give here. Now if you see here, it says use of unresolved identifier book. This typically happens because of two reasons. One, you need to import certain libraries to make sure that you understand that you're trying to handle core data. What are libraries? Libraries are routines already written by Swift or by Apple, which you can use for doing your programming. So all of those you have done so far is all was in a UI kit. It is by default available. You didn't have to do anything. So we never did it. So when you created the file, it automatically imports UI kit. Similarly, you need to import something known as CoreData. CoreData is the library which is all the functions of a persistent container or things that you want to do with your book values and all. Still giving an error. The second reason is sometimes it's not able to find the value. So if you build it again, but Control B is build, or you can go to product and you can build from here as well, or you can Command B, you can build from here as well, right? So now after build as well, if it is showing you the error, it's basically for the reason that sometimes your Xcode environment has to be restarted if you create a new entity. So I should not say bug, but it is a little issue you have with the Xcode compiler. So go ahead and close it. If you open it next time, hopefully it'll go away. So if you face that problem even after entering CoreData, just reopen Xcode interface and hopefully it will go away. See, this time it has gone away. It is giving a different error by saying, hey, you defined a book but you're not using it. That's a fair function. It basically means you're wasting a resource. Why you're defining when you don't want to use it? But that's not the case with us, right? So we are going to use it. So what we'll say is we'll say book, which is this variable, right? Because now I have the context of the book, and this book will represent now my entity which I defined. If you remember, if you go back here, this entity has these values, and that's what I'm going to do. So I'll say go back here, I'll say book dot, which is this name. The book name is in the text field, right? You remember the text field? Book text field, right? So you will say that book dot book name. Oops, where did it go? Okay, book dot book name equal to book text field dot text. You can force it. You can confirm that yes, I'll get a value. Similarly, you can say book dot author name equals to author text field dot text. Then you have two more, right? Book dot status equal to status text field dot text. And then you have one more, book dot genre equals to genre text field dot text. Brilliant. So what you have done is you have created a record. Now you said this is a record, but you have yet not saved it. You got the context, you assigned the value. Now for saving is, since it is going to save in a database, you have to always put it in a do catch loop. I'll tell you what is a do catch. Do means do my job, and when you're doing, please try to save my record. So how do you save it? You have this context, and the context is the name my context, right? So you try my context, space my context dot, you'll get a save function automatically. See this throw here? I'll explain that to you. What is throw? Whenever you're trying, that means if it is failing, it will give you an error, and that error you basically handle using a catch statement. So if it is throwing, you will catch it. So put open braces and close braces for this, and then you say that if there is an error, please print the error on the console. For some reason, if it is not able to do it, it will tell you the error. It could be for any reason. Your book, after you created this, you change the entity here, and this book name is no longer known as book name, but let's say book name. So author name is known as author only, right? So if you do those changes later on, system would not know, and hence it provides a try and catch method, right? So again, let me repeat this. Do is to perform some functions. Within do, I'm saying please try saving my record, which is in this context now, right? My context, which is where you have saved, put every value. And if you try always throw something which is a error. So say if you try and I'll catch, if that's an error, I'll print. If there's no error, it'll anyways go through. Okay, once it is done, you're done with your job. Once you're done with your job, I told you can do two things. For now, what I can do is I can make everything blank. So how do you make everything blank? You remember that you have written a function for that, right? And that function was for reset button, right? Oh, you know what? We have not done the status reset here. So I'm going to say status.text equals to this. Similarly, we have not done the check for status here. So I can add that as well, right? You know how? I'm just copying this and pasting so that I'm going to save some of my effort. Similarly, if I say status text field is equal to blank, if you recall, I'll say status cannot be blank. And everything will be, this will become the first responder. This is a placeholder for this. This become the first responder. Border will become this. This will become this, right? And anything else I need to do? I think when you are entering the status, which we have to drag so that we can make it border 0 and this 0, right? So for that, let's do that as well, right? It will be a quick refresher for you as well. Go back to your main storyboard. Make it a little large, maybe this one. Split screen. Click on the screen and get your add view controller. Click here. And then this is a status. Click on the status. Go to your last icon on the status bar, and then from there I want the editing end, right? So editing begin, sorry, that's where we are doing it. If you see here, we are doing it in editing changed, so we'll do it here as well in editing changed. So we'll take the editing change, drag it with the control button on, put it over here, make it status editing change. You can make it a text field. If you recall, it is already for editing change. Very cool. Connected. Exit out. You can do the similar thing here as well. Where has it gone? Right here. You can do a similar thing, which is status text field dot layer dot border width. You want to set it back to 0. If the people starts authoring again, and then status text field dot layer dot border width, border color equals to UI color dot gray dot CJ color, right? Okay, I just want to check one thing in the beginning. Okay, hold on. Let's make sure that everything is done right. Is unable to go to false. I'm going to remove this for now. Okay, which we tried before, so that we can go and edit it accordingly. All right, brilliant. I think we have successfully done save. You will not be able to see where it is saved. We will learn about the querying and getting the value again, but let's see. So what it should do is, if you want to repeat the learning once again, go back to your save function, which is right here. You got the app delegate reference from the application, that is UI application share.delegate. You said this is of type app delegate. You got the context from that app delegate. You got the persistent container view context. Context is required to save or interact with your database. You define a book variable of your entity type book and say get this context, so you can link the context back to the book so that you can get all the variables that you need. You assign the value to it, and once it is assigned, you're saying do catch. That means please now save it, and if there's an error, give that error. I told you why it is important try catch, because this is independent to your disk class. So if you do changes here, let's say right now it is working fine, but if you go ahead and do some changes to your database or you delete your database, it should be able to find out errors and tell you accordingly. Okay, and we are also calling that save book with the else function of validate button. Lovely. Now let's go ahead and click on the run function and see if it is working fine. Okay, so let's give it a name. Let's say add book. I'll give the name the last Scintilla by me, Shantanu Barua. And you see it perfectly working, right? Oh, you can general cannot be blank, so it took the friction. And then, yeah, this is also working. So if I start typing, it goes away. So I'll say currently reading. Sorry. And once it is done, now I'm going to click save. So what will happen when I click save? It will come here because everything is there, and then it will come here, right? So let's see, save. It didn't go through. Okay, we'll see why. And I think this is a good segue to teach you debugging as well. That, oh, I think it went through. We didn't call the other function. I'm sorry. I think it went through, but it's not cleaning the screen. I'll tell you why though. Okay. If you see here after save book, we are doing nothing, right? So it is simply saving and stopping here. So what we should do is we should reset our value, which is a reset button, right? So we didn't call this function from here. So I said, once you're done, reset everything. But reset will require a function. So, okay, let's make it simple. I'll say reset. I'll just take all of those and just put it over here. I'll teach about how to call function with button later on, but for now I will make everything blank, and I'll make book text field dot become first responder so that the cursor is on the first one. Works? All right, let's try to run this again. Just align it properly. All right, so this time when we go ahead and run this program, and let's give another name. I say adventure of Tom Sawyer. I give the author name Mark Twain, one of my favorite books, by the way. It's a fiction, right? So I'll say fiction, and then I'll say I've already read it. And this time if I save it, if you recall, it's going to blank everything and it will make this one as the first responder. Let's go ahead and see if it happens. Cool, right? So it's saving, it's coming back to where it should be. All right, so we have saved this now. In the next class, we are going to learn about how to display whatever we are saving. So far, we have saved 2 books. In the book display, can we display those books or not? Until then, thank you for listening and happy coding.